You ready to go, Mr. Hunter?
I'm ready to go.
All right, Mr. Boyd's going to give us our invocation this morning.
Dear God, thank you for our many blessings and abundant life here in Danville and Boyle County. We ask that you would lead and guide this group in making decisions for the community today. We ask that you would be with our city and county employees and let them have a safe day and return home tonight from a safe day's work. We also ask that you be with our military and armed forces today as they protect our freedom and ensure our quality of life. In your name we pray, amen.
The February 26, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will now be called to order. Approval of minutes for January 22nd, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Financial report, January 2020.
Yeah, that's in your packet. I'd be glad to answer any questions. We're going to, later in the meeting under new business, look at our preliminary budget, so we'll get into more details on finances. But that is the January finance report. Glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, we have to prove that.
Any questions? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Mann makes a motion.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kelly seconds. All in favor? Passed unanimously. I was going to back up. I was remiss. We have a new member. Mrs. Rita Douglas just joined the commission. She was just sworn in before she came in this morning. So I'd like to welcome her to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you. Thank you for your service. All right, I apologize for that. Construction and securities.
Again, in your packet, just for information purposes, but you might notice the standing balance of our cash bonds has dropped substantially because we did last month authorize part of that bond, that cash release on the sidewalks on Hunt Farm. And just to give you a heads up, we are making progress on all of these. The city assures me that Maple Tree, Center Estates, and Foxgate are going to be under construction, and there's actually contractors lined up to get all those projects finished, according to the City Public Works. So hopefully if we get those projects done, we'll be releasing all those off our list for the first time in a lot of years. But they're there again as a placeholder, assuming we can get those built this spring. And again, this is just for information purpose for our letters of credit, cash bonds.
Okay, subdivision approvals.
Lisa's going to do those, and I'm going to flip through them on the slides for the.
Okay.
You guys should have those in your packet.
Selfrefind Property Management LLC has applied for approval of a subdivision on a tract of land containing .985 acres located at 459 Bate Street. Property is zoned Highway Business District. Lisa?
Jamie Durham, doing business as Selfrefind, has submitted a subdivision plat dividing a single parcel into Tract A at 0.425 acres and Tract B at .560 acres. They're both zoned highway business. Tract A has existing access on Dillahay Street. Tract B will require access onto either Dillahay or Bate Street. It's received preliminary approval and requires minor technical corrections.
Any questions? So everything's correct?
Yes, sir.
So is this just combining tracts? Is this just a paperwork item or something new gonna be built or?
Yes.
He is going to build something new on the empty, the vacant tract, yeah.
I move we approve.
Got a motion for approval?
Second.
And a second. All in favor? Pass. has applied for approval of a subdivision on a tract of land containing 18.342 acres located at 0 Caldwell Road. The property is zoned AG agricultural.
Stephen Carroll submitted this plat for division of the Mae Lamb Estate. The plat's received preliminary approval and just needs the addition of an access notation, which he submitted today, so it is ready to go.
Any questions? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Kelly makes a motion to approve. Second. Commissioner DiMartino, we got all in favor? Passes unanimously. We got Timothy Aulick has applied for an approval of subdivision on tract of land containing 11.164 acres located at 10300 Lebanon, Parksville, Kentucky. The property is zoned, I guess that's Lebanon, Lebanon, it says Lebanon, Parksville, Kentucky. Okay.
Lebanon Road.
Parksville, Kentucky. Property is zoned agricultural.
Timothy Aulick owns two parcels at 10300 Lebanon Road, and he's combining them into a single tract, Tract A, at 11.164 acres. The plat's technically correct, received preliminary approval, and is ready to be signed today.
I make a motion, we approve.
Commissioner Manning makes a motion for approval. For a second.
Second.
Commissioner Kelly seconds. All in favor? Motion passes. Brandon and Stacy Miller and John Hensley have applied for approval of a subdivision on a tract of land containing 6.718 acres. What's the case? Oh, sorry about that. All right, let's go backwards. Michael McAfee has applied for an approval of a subdivision on a tract of land containing .826 acres located at 0 Stanford Road, Danville, Kentucky. The property is on highway business.
Michael McAfee's submitted this subdivision plat dividing off .826 acres along the Stanford Road side of this development that he brought before us previously. The plat's received preliminary approval, needs minor technical corrections. It's ready to be approved today.
Point out one thing too. Again, Lisa just said this is part of that zone change we did on Stanford Road. So you see the driveway right across from it is good. But this is the furthest easternmost part of that 40-some acres we zoned to commercial and multifamily. And this is the highway business. But just want to point out that there were requirements on deeper landscape buffers. And you can see those on the plat. So some of these items on here are restricting this first property cut due to the restrictions or conditions that you all approved as part of the zone change.
Is that currently being done, or those buffers?
Yeah, there's a project, I think, ready to go, and they'll all have to be developed at the time of the construction of the project.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion.
Make a motion, we approve.
Commissioner Boyd makes a motion for approval.
That's second.
Commissioner Griffin seconds. All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. Now we'll go Brandon and Stacy Miller and John Hensley have applied for approval of subdivision on a tract of land containing 6.71 acres located at 521 South Ewell Street and 304 West Fifth Street, Perryville. Property zone agricultural, single-family residential, and central business.
The Millers and Hensleys have submitted this subdivision plat transferring small parcels between the neighbors Hensley, Miller, and Johnson, basically cleaning up and squaring out property lines on West Fifth Street in Perryville. And as you said, it has multiple zoning districts. It's received preliminary approval and needs several technical corrections, but it's ready to be approved today.
Any permission to approve?
Commissioner Kelly makes a motion to approve.
I second.
Commissioner DiMartino seconds. All in favor? Does that need to be made with the corrections?
Yeah, you're all approving the plats as marked up, as they went through preliminary approval to be corrected.
Motion passes. Lee and Laura Welty and Leonard and Christina Landry applied for approval of subdivision on tract of land containing .783 acres located at 1926 Parksville Road. Property is zoned agricultural.
The Weltys have applied this subdivision, for the subdivision plat to transfer a small, non-conforming parcel from their property to neighboring Landry property, just a small triangular tract of land, non-conforming because it obviously has no road frontages on the back side of their property. The plat's received technical, or preliminary approval, needs minor technical corrections, and other than that, is ready to be approved today.
Make a motion for approval.
All right, Commissioner Boyd makes a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Commissioner Kelly seconds. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay, Wade, Hope. Is that Hope? Has applied for an approval of a subdivision on tract of land containing 15.002 acres located at 3725 US 68, Terrible, property zone agricultural.
The Hooks have applied for this subdivision plat that's titled the Divine Property. It's dividing their 15-acre tract on US 68 in Perryville into two parcels. Both the parcels have frontage on 68, but I believe will share access due to the pond location. It's zoned agriculture, as you said. It's received preliminary approval, required technical corrections, which have been made and is ready to be signed today.
I move we approve.
Commissioner Manning makes a motion for approval.
I second.
Commissioner Griffin makes a second. All in favor? Motion passes. All right, so public hearings. The Wellstone Company has filed a site development plan application on a tract of land containing 13 acres located at 1648 Stanford Road. Property is zoned industrial business development.
Thank you. I'll be doing the public hearings. This is the first case up there on the screen. You should have that in your packet. And you just heard the description. There's not a whole lot here. They're adding a 6,400 square foot equipment building on the Caldwell Stone property. You see it right here. That's on Stanford Road. It's zoned industrial business development, or IBD. All items shown on the plat done by Vantage Engineering meets or exceeds the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And again, it's an existing industrial site, and they're just doing an expansion on the site. I would point out that under the site plan changes we made in May, If this was a new site, this wouldn't have met the threshold to require a site plan review, but because it's an existing site and it was under site plan review, this is technically, we're amending an existing site plan that was approved, so any future buildings will have to come through site plan review regardless of their size, because it was approved under that. But if this was new construction somewhere else, this would have went straight to a permit, because again, it's only a 6,400 square foot building. But in this case, we look at everything cumulative on the property that's out there already on the site. And again, it meets or exceeds all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And Kendall's here, John's here too, if you guys have any questions regarding the property or what's happening out there.
Okay. Anything the applicant wish to add to the presentation? Okay. Anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor? Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Okay, any discussion?
Make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Kettle makes motion approved. Commissioner DeMartino seconds that motion. All in favor? Unanimous, motion passes. LMD Holdings LLC and AFI 005 LLC has filed an application to rezone property on a tract of land containing 271.092 acres located at 1695 Lancaster Road, 871 East Main Street, 867 East Main Street, and 80 Old Lancaster Road, Danville, Kentucky. Requested zone changes from agricultural, single-family residential, and highway business to light industrial. This was tabled January 22nd. I think it's going to continue to be tabled.
Yeah, there was no activity from the applicant over the last month. We sent some emails, and as you all know, we were looking for development conditions and some specifics about the property, and none were received this month. I did talk to the applicant, and that is their desire to leave it tabled into the future.
So we don't need to take any.
Just move on past it unless you guys want to do something else.
All right, so that will remain tabled. Wesley Carter has filed an application to rezone property on a tract of land containing 4.218 acres located at 313 Baughman Avenue. Request zone changes from single-family residential to single-family residential.
Yep.
R1C.
Correct. Okay, and this one's going to be familiar to some of you. Some of you weren't. Again, we got a new member, and I think one or two of you might not have been here last month. We've got some cases, and I'll just say something real quick here. The zone changes, and we got some future land use map cases coming up here. What happens in these cases, if an applicant proposes a zone change and it complies with the future land use map, they go straight to the zone change. If it does not comply with the future land use map, the applicant has a couple choices. They can either amend the future land use map procedurally, or they can try to argue a different strategy under the state law, the major changes argument, for example. This applicant actually brought the future land use map amendment to you last month, so you heard a lot about the case, and there were even some neighbors here last month. This month, we're doing the zone change request. The two cases we've got coming later, both the future land use map amendments and the zone change the applicant would like to have those heard on the same day. So we're going to kind of do those in back-to-back format. But this one you guys saw last month. This is the property on Franklin and Baughman. As you see, the 4.21 acres. There's access to Baughman here, and Franklin's a narrow city street here. We've got a neighbor or two, I think, here from Franklin, and they were here last month. And interesting enough, before I get into the technical parts of the staff report, and the staff report is in your packet, so I'm going to walk through that, and they should be in there, but the slides will be on the screen, and we've got some other stuff to show you on the screen. But the Franklin neighbors that did show up, last month there was kind of a concept plan that showed a cul-de-sac, maybe style development, and there was a lot of discussion about access to Baughman or not access to Baughman, what traffic might use Franklin. And since that time, the applicant has met with the city, and the city's made it very clear to them how they want the access to function, and I'll go over that in a second. But I think the neighbors coming forward and saying, hey, maybe Franklin's not the best answer here, I think is what that got that started. And so we've obviously got a compromise from what you saw last month. But this is a zone change, and actually the conditions are part of the zone change, and they're recordable conditions at this point if it was approved. But we'll walk you through what all is being planned by the applicant. The applicant's here, they have legal counsel here, I believe there's some neighbors here. But last month, you guys did amend the future land use map. It was changed. So it was low density, and it's been changed to moderate density because the applicant intends to do single family next to single family, but smaller lots, more dense housing. And their zoning request is going from R1A, which is a larger lot single family, to R1C, which is a smaller lot single family. Zooming out in the bigger map, this is the future land use map. You can see we have multifamily, we've got moderate density. So when you the school's right here. So you've got some low density, which is the yellow, which allows development up to 5 units to acre. The moderate density allows you to go over 5, up to 16 units an acre. And then the multifamily that's out there, funny enough, is the high cap. So we've got all kinds of future land uses kind of in this general area of Baughman and Franklin. And again, this was amended formally last month. So the moderate density category is now in play, which then opens up the opportunity for a request to the 1C zoning. So with that, I'm going to jump on the first page of staff report real quick and just point out a few things. Again, the applicant is Wesley Carter. Location's 313 Baughman. Even though it has access to Franklin, you can see the strip better here. I'll back up because when we colored in the future land use, you can kind of see it. It has a strip that goes to Baughman here. So its address is technically 313 Baughman. It's 4.218 acres. Current zoning is R1A, which we used to know as GRA. It's our large lot single family. The minimum lot sizes are 10,000 square foot. It's all on sewer. The applicant is requesting to go to the 1C category, which is a 5,000 square foot lot minimum. They're not going to a 5,000 square foot lot. They're going to a condominium style development that we'll show you in a second. Where the homes would think of Saddle Ridge on the other side of town, these would be condominium developments. They'd be standalone single-family structures, some attached, some detached, but they would be developed in a condominium regime. Everything would be single-family under the 1C standard, which now allows single-family homes, condominiums, patio homes, etc. So with that, I'll walk you through some stuff, and then I'm going to get into the technical development conditions. You all saw this last month, and I think it was an article in the paper. These are the style homes that are intended to be built on the property. The development conditions will outline some things specifically about garages and square footages, but again, the property is intended to be developed. The conditions say up to 35 single-family dwellings. However, we're going to show you some layouts they're working on that are under that 35, but that's more a cap that they're proposing for the single-family developments. This is just a floor plan that they gave us early on, kind of showing a garage and some living space. You all saw these last month. A few of these units would be two kind of twin homes or attached, but most of them are standalone single-family dwellings. And we showed you some of these kind of conceptuals. But I think the big change was last month, it showed a cul-de-sac coming off Franklin, that the road would kind of come in off Franklin and terminate in a cul-de-sac, again, forcing all the traffic to the Franklin side versus the Baughman side. And there's kind of what conceptually it kind of showed, this would be Franklin and the homes would be back here kind of in this fashion. What they've been working on, this is the property as it exists. What they've been working on are layouts. So this is where they're at today. And again, these are going to evolve. This is just the zone change. They're willing to commit to conditions, very specific conditions, but the layout is a fluid process as they work through engineering challenges, access challenges, working with the city on water, sewer, and access. But the city gave them clear guidance for fire access, and they would like to see 2 access points to this development, one on Baughman, and for them to connect at Franklin. Now, that is not a public street. That is a private travel way because this is going to be a condominium development. So ultimately, this whole project will be a condominium plat, and these will be sellable footprints. You'll buy your unit, portion of your yard. There's mandatory HOA requirement, and then all of this property, open space, The travel ways will all be maintained by the homeowners association as it moves forward. So that's concept we got today. This is one they worked on last week with a hammerhead kind of in the center. This is one that was before. So again, they've been kind of plowing through some different layouts. But I think the main change now is this one shows the access to Baughman, and the conditions I'm going to read commit to two things that I think are real important. A, that there'll be that secondary access, and B, all the construction access has to come through Baughman. So there'll be no construction traffic that would come down Franklin. This will all be developed from the Baughman access point, but over time, once the travel ways are finished, the traffic would naturally split in both directions or some direction. And we've talked with some of the neighbors about that. There's still some concerns about traffic and just, you know, what would happen, and I'll let the applicant and address that as well as the neighbors. But from the staff standpoint, you know, they're working on an exhibit. We were glad to see that we got 10 solid conditions to sort of set the framework of what would happen on this property. That's what we like to see with zone changes. Again, that's the water sewer map we showed you before. That's the next project. So let's head on back, and I'm gonna walk you through these conditions and wrap up on this case, and then take any questions you might have. So page 2 of your staff report starts with our general development plan language, and our zoning ordinance specifically says that the general development plan is required with the submission of a zone change. And a general development plan are conditions. They're recordable conditions. In fact, the zoning ordinance says they have to be in a format that can be recorded in the courthouse. So with all zone change requests, we need conditions. We need them in a format that can be recorded, and then they run with the real estate into the future unless they're formally amended back through this body. So we told this applicant that, you know, exhibits are great. You can do them by exhibit, or you can do them in written form. And so we've got 10 conditions, very detailed, to try to address the issues I think you heard at the future land use map hearing, as well as some of the site challenges they have on the property. So those start on page 2, and I'm gonna walk you through those. And then again, these are the type of things you all can wordsmith. You can ask for more. The applicant may offer others. Neighbors may say, hey, I have a problem with number 6, and this is where the debate goes. But this is the starting point that the staff asked the applicant to address, and we think they're in pretty good shape, at least from what we initially requested. So number 1 says the property would be limited to a single access point to Baughman and Franklin Drive. So it says there will be 2 access points. The location and configuration of each of such access point shall be coordinated and approved by the city of Danville. So those access points are going into Danville's domain, into those right-of-ways, and they'll have to be approved formally through the city of Danville. The primary access to Baughman will be paved at the 80% mark of construction. The primary access to Franklin will be paved during the initial construction phase. And then the last sentence is the one I think that some of the neighbors raised about Franklin. It says all construction, entry and exit will be from Baughman Avenue. So again, I think the plan is get a plat in here at some point if this is approved, and then the construction access would be developed from Baughman, and they would build it from one direction or the other, and eventually it'd all be paved, and then it would connect to both city streets. Number 2 says the property may be developed with a maximum of 35 single-family residences. Again, they've set a cap of 35, puts that in the density range of just a tad bit over 8 units to the acre, although the concept plans I showed you, none of which had 35 units on it. Again, I think that's given them some wiggle room as they work through their engineering, but clearly what you're seeing out here is more in that 29 to 32 range. So, and again, if it's back in the, let's say 32 range, you're back just around that 7 units to the acre. So again, this is a fluid process as far as engineering goes. We're just at the zone change, but this number says 35, and at some point, I think their goal is to be in that 30 to 34 range as where the target they want to be. Number 3 says all utility lines shall be located underground. The applicant agrees the property shall be connected to sanitary sewer. 4 says no residences will be constructed with any platted gas line easements. And there is a gas line that runs through this property here, and there is a platted easement. And number 4 says we'll have no structures. I think it's interesting the way we sort of worded that, no residences. Again, it's not likely you could do that anyhow, but we wanted to make sure that was in the conditions. So again, anyone that is purchasing property into the future, gets these conditions, they become attached to the deed to some degree, and then it's clearly, if no one ever sees the plat, then they understand there's a gas line on the property. Number 5 is a cookie cutter, what I'll call condition, but it's one we hope to see in the future, especially on residential developments. It says the property will be developed in compliance with the subdivision regulations of Boyle County, Kentucky. It's the law anyhow, and you have to do it, but I think it's interesting to put it in the conditions, because there's always some debate on how we sometimes develop things under the subdivision regulations, as far as the platting goes, or bonding the streets, or whatnot. This says it'll be developed in coordination with our countywide subregs. Number 6 says street lighting will be provided by uniform design lighting poles of composite material or metal. Again, uniform street lights is the goal throughout the project. 7 says each single-family residence shall have, exclusive of garages and porches, a minimum of 1,000 square feet. All residences shall have at least a one-car garage. So again, the idea is all the properties would be, in some degree, they'd all have garages, they'd all be standalone. Some would be 2-story, some may be 1-story, and some may actually be twin home style development. All residents and other structures, number 8 says, shall be built with 20% brick stone. All driveways shall be paved. Number 9 is a little wordy, and I won't go through all of it, but it deals with the property. And at this point, it's more something that needs to be worked out with the neighbors and what the developer is proposing, basically, especially on this Franklin side. It's saying the applicant agrees to install a 10-foot wide vegetative landscape buffer on the western property line, so that's the western property line, or a privacy fence in lieu of a landscape vegetative buffer, and maintain a 10-foot wide natural buffer on the eastern property line. Any fencing along the western property line shall be of uniform design and color to be prescribed by the developer and/or the homeowner association. All existing trees located on the perimeter of the development along the northern or eastern, which have a caliber of 8 inches or greater, within that 10-foot buffer will be maintained. So what the applicants indicated to us is they're willing to put up a privacy fence, buffer, any combination. They'd like to coordinate that with the neighbors, and then, especially along Franklin, and make that decision in coordination with them. But they're maintaining the natural buffer and maintaining any larger trees that we have on the property. And again, all that would then become part of the HOA's responsibility down the road. And then the last one talks about the HOA. And again, we hear about this all the time, but to put it in the conditions locks it down. It says the property will be developed with restrictive covenants, and those are already drafted, although we're not party really to those, nor do we need to be, requiring each lot owner to be a member of a homeowner association until at least 60% of the lots developed on the property have been sold. The developer shall be responsible for maintenance of the open space, after which maintenance responsibility of any open space may be transferred to a duly organized HOA. So there's your 10 conditions that the applicant has put forward for this project. And then I'll go through the rest of this pretty quick. Page 3 of your staff report gets into our comprehensive plan. Again, all zone changes are to be reviewed for compliance with our comprehensive plan, which is the map, but is also the comprehensive plan, which is a lot of other stuff. Let me get back to the future land use map. So a lot of times, you know, I think in the past, we talk about the comprehensive plan and we talk about zone changes, and we say, is it in compliance with the future land use map? Well, this is the comprehensive plan, as you guys know, and it's a whole lot of stuff. And what we do with every zone change is we look through the comprehensive plan and find the relevant provisions that relate to goals and objectives that either support or are close to discussion points related to a specific property. Those are outlined on page 3, 4, and 5 of your staff report, and 6. But the map is typically what we look at. So the way you guys have to review zone changes is pretty cookie cutter in the statutes. In fact, it's laid out on page 7 of your staff report. The Planning Commission has to find that zone change requests are in compliance or consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. So that's the map. That's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's a combination, but the map obviously trumps a lot of the other text. And in fact, chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan says we're supposed to follow the map. So that's why now, the way we've amended the process, if a zone change request is not in compliance with the future land use map, the applicant has 2 choices. Either amend the future land use map or make a legal argument under the statute, which is shown on page 7, which is that major changes argument, or that the zoning's inappropriate. So at this case, in the staff's opinion, this does comply with the directive of the future land use map, the moderate density category, obviously developing single family in that density range. And the policy directives that are outlined on 3, 4, and 5 are sort of judgment calls, and that's where you all come in. A lot of policies that relate to this kind of development that we pulled from the goals and objectives, and we outlined those in page 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, and again, the staff items of concern are the same things we put in the future land use map case last month. They're on page 7. Obviously, project phasing is a concern. Just, you know, again, are we starting on the Franklin end, the Boffman end, that construction access road? And then, obviously, last month, our concern was primary and secondary access, and now that's been committed to in those development conditions by way of agreeing that there would be access on both roads. So, and again, our cookie cutter motions are on page 8, up or down, and then our attorney obviously helps you guys with those as we get to that point in any public hearing debate. I'll be glad to answer any questions on this case. The applicant's here, the attorney's here, and I think there's some neighbors here, maybe for and against. I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys may have of the staff.
I have a question about the primary access road being paved at the 80% mark of construction. So will that be an issue if, for some reason, this is started and then doesn't develop as rapidly as maybe people would expect?
I'll let the applicant address that. This is the shot of Franklin as we look down through Franklin. If you guys didn't drive out there, Franklin's a narrow city street with a narrow right-of-way, although it has pavement width, obviously enough to accommodate, you know, fire protection, although there's really not a place to turn around. I think the goal was they put that out there so that that would be kind of a gravel construction road to a certain point in construction that makes sense to pave this. Since they're not paving this as a city street, which would be in theory wider, stronger, deeper with rock, and this would be just really a private travel way. I think their goal is to keep that a gravel section as they do the construction and finish out that kind of last tail paving when the construction's at the 80% mark. But I'll let them address that. It's a good point. If this thing only builds out 10 homes and stalls out, we've only got partially a street. We've got a paved street to Franklin and a gravel street to Boffman. We'd be pushing all that traffic one direction versus the other.
So, I guess, piggybacking on Susie's question, when I was reading that, I was assuming construction meant development of the street, utilities and so forth.
It's of the whole, it's the build out of the project, the way it's worded. I'll let the applicant address that, but the street would be paved at the 80% of the construction, I think means at the build out of the units and the overall site. It's a good way that may be where you all want to go with that. And again, I'll have to let the applicant maybe get up here and tell you what he's thinking on that. We just wanted to make sure there was a connection to both streets. Ultimately, it has to be paved under our rules anyhow, but it's going to be, but the goal is that's a construction access or entrance for a period of this build out. And it's probably intended to be gravel or some other harder surface that can deal with the wear and tear as opposed to pushing that traffic down Franklin. Again, Wes Carter's here, who's the applicant. I think that question, is there any other questions you guys, or I can follow up later after he addresses that?
Good morning. My name is Wesley Carter. Thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. In regard to your question, Ms. Kelly, the reason that we're ideally hoping to pave from Boffman at the 80% mark is to preserve the integrity of the road. If we blacktop it immediately, and then we send heavy machinery and trucks and everything through it on day one, we're gonna fracture the integrity of the road. It's gonna hike the expenses up, subsequently making the cost of the homes higher in order to recoup any kind of break even or ROI on the complex. The idea of the paving is to, the best land is off of Franklin. That's where the highest quality land is with regard to this project. So we would immediately begin paving off of Franklin, and we would begin building closest to Franklin and build it towards Boffman that way, and then we would pave as we finish projects. But I mean, as far as the completion of the paving, I have no problem committing to paving it if we don't finish the development. My wife and I live here. This is our home. We're very committed to the city. We're very committed to this region. Obviously, no one can foretell the future. But if anyone has questions, I just ask that you all look at our track record. We've built over 150,000 square feet in 4 years. We've done it successfully. Primarily, it's been for my employer. We have built multiple personal family homes personally. As a matter of fact, we've built several beta tests of these homes so that we know where our costs are. We're building a third beta test right now of an exact style of this home, again, so that we're not going in half-cocked. We know where we're going, we know what we're doing, we know how to get there. And we're thankful for the opportunity. We'll be getting our stone from these folks right here. So they'll make sure we have good rock beds for the construction. And I hope that it adequately addresses your question. If you have any additional ones, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
At what point would you realize that you're not going to finish the project? You said if you didn't finish it, then you go ahead and pay for it.
Oh, well, I mean, we're going to finish the project. But as no one can foretell the future, I just wanted to make the statement that we would be willing to commit to pave the road if doom and gloom occurred. Because no one's wanting to see anything incomplete. It's not going to be. But everyone has to think worst case scenario. Mr. Manning?
Just following up on the three comments that have made so far, and a lot of the concerns we heard last month by the existing property owners on Franklin. I guess I would be more comfortable if there was a time limit on it, that you said, if either 80% or X many years, that we'll pave that. So
It's
we are
very fair.
15 years from now, and
we-
it's still not finished, and
we-
it's still not paved.
We would be willing to commit to 5 years on that.
Mr. Hunter, is this the kind of concern that could be addressed with bonding and the kind that is typically addressed with bonding?
Interesting enough, because this is going to be a private street, private travelway, this would not fall under our bonding
Okay.
requirement because we're not building a public street. That's a condition. It could be that we could say that we could backstop this travelway. We typically don't do that for other developments in the community. They're private travelways. They just have to pave them. It's required by the city of Danville. All travelways, driveways, whatever. We don't do gravel, anything in Danville. So ultimately, it's going, unless it's a construction entrance. I think the time limit is one way to address it, and make that part of that condition, that it would be 80% or 5 years, whatever comes first, or if you all feel it should be 3 years. I mean, that's something back and forth. But I guess in theory, we could hold a bond against that as a backstop, as a special condition. That's where the subregs part comes in. Sure.
I think it's relevant that it's not a standard that we've held other private pathways to. I think that's kind of answers my question.
You can have questions from.
Yes.
I'd
Yeah,
like
the
to hear those
applicants.
before I ask my questions. That may be answered by the audience.
Okay, anything else the applicant wishes to address?
Just happy to answer questions as they come.
All right, sir, thank you. Anyone wish to speak in favor of this project? Please come up and introduce yourself, name, address.
Yes, my name is Cho Sargent. I currently reside at 295 Dallas Drive in Houstonville, Kentucky. But I am a friend and colleague of Dr. Wes Carter, and I feel like I can speak to his character, that he is fully capable of a project like this. But also, too, just the need of affordable housing, because I don't live in Lincoln County by choice. I live there because of the lack of affordable housing. And I would be very interested in purchasing one of these homes, even myself, and because I trust what he's going to build, and I would love to live in Danville again. It's a great town. I love it. But affordable housing is something it's definitely lacking. And I think this would be a great economic boost for our community. And also, I know that if there's any concerns with community members, I know his integrity. I'm also his pastor, and I know that he is a man of his word and honor that will go the extra mile to make sure that if any issues come up, that they are resolved satisfactorily amongst all parties. So I would like to speak in favor of this today and just say that I think this is a great idea. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Please state your name and address.
My name is Tanner Good. I'm a real estate broker here in town, 10 years in the business. Black Tie Real Estate Services, 120 North 3rd Street. That's my wife Rachel over there. I've done several deals with Mr. Carter. Everything's went fine. He's built a home over in Harrodsburg. It's on the market. Affordable housing is a thing that we need here in Boyle County. So we have a couple properties in Argyle Woods with Mr. Carver. Everything's pretty much went over well with those. So I see these being something of the future for Boyle County in general. So that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Not seeing any. At this time, anyone wish to speak in opposition? Please come forward, state your name and address, please.
My name's Charles Hinkle. I live at 128 Franklin Avenue, which is the next to the last house on the left. The pipeline, the gas line goes through right through the corner, and the only good thing I see, they're not gonna build exactly right behind my house, which I don't care. They put up a fence, that ain't gonna bother me. What I'm worried about is the traffic. Franklin Avenue is 14 foot 2 inches wide right in front of my house. You blacktop right off the bat, everybody's gonna go in and out on Franklin Avenue. There ain't no doubt. It take, what do you say, 5 years maybe before he blacktops off of Balkan Avenue. All right, how wide's this street gonna be? This street's supposed to be, a normal street's 20 foot wide. You're gonna have curbs, street lights, sidewalks, what way I read it here. And if it's a private drive, is it gonna be wide enough for the fire trucks and the garbage trucks enough to pass each other? Yesterday, I couldn't get down Franklin Avenue because I'm at a UPS truck. I had to pull over in somebody's front yard. Is this street's gonna be the same way? You know, and stuff like that. That's what I don't understand. I don't know how you're gonna put 8 houses on an acre. I can't get that, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't know anything about that. But it's, no matter what happens, Franklin Avenue is gonna be a main thoroughfare in and out of there, and it ain't wide enough. You know, and you can't make it one way, because, you know, same thing. You put a cul-de-sac in, same thing. I don't know what, you know, how you gonna get traffic in and out of there? If it's gonna be 5 years, any kind of dump truck comes in there one way, dumps a load of rock, he's gonna go out the other way, because is the street gonna be wide enough for him to turn around in? Or whatever, you know what I mean? You know, that's the way I look at it. So no matter what you do, you're gonna have traffic running up and down Franklin Avenue, and you have to pull over in somebody's front yard to get by, whether it's a mail truck, garbage truck, UPS truck, whatever. You know, fire truck, whatever. You can't get up and down the street. You know, and if he builds a private drive, is that drive gonna be the same all the way around through there? Fire truck comes in, here sits the UPS truck or the mail truck. He can't get to the fire because the truck's in the way. The street ain't wide. What I'm saying.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, you want to address that? Or would you care to?
I'm going to ask our primary engineer, Nathan King of KWM Engineering, to come up with me as well, as he may be able to answer some of the technical questions, as I am not an engineer.
Thank you.
But just in regard to that, Boffman Avenue to be used as a construction entrance, it will be accessible on day one. Even if it's not all the way blacktopped, it will be accessible, it will be drivable, it will be, you know, if we're going to take trucks that are hauling tons of rock through that thoroughfare will also support a fire truck or an ambulance through Boffman. No one wants anything that is unsafe or unhealthy. My wife and I personally own that property on Franklin right at the very end. We are property owners on Franklin. I have a sincere heart for our tenants there. They're dear, dear people, and, you know, I don't know that I could sleep at night if anything ever happened. So I assure you, safety is a core fabric in what we're trying to do. And we want to do things the right way. To preserve the integrity of the road, we're talking about saving well into the high 5 figures of expenses by doing it the way that we're proposing. So these are real dollars. I'm personally already well into the thousands into this project, personally. I assure you we are very capable, we're very cognizant, and we are very conscious of all of the concerns and all of the opportunities here. I've personally spoken to the superintendent of the Danville school system, Dr. Tammy McDonald. She's in high support of this. I've personally spoken to Mr. Jody Laster, who's in support of the project. I've personally spoken to many people across the community. We want to do our due diligence. We want to do it the right way. And I'll let Nathan address any technical engineering questions.
Any questions?
The width of the road, are you gonna change the road? If you're not, I agree with the gentleman that spoke against it, because, I mean, I live on Maple Tree Place, and we can't get down the street when there's a UPS truck there. Okay?
As far as
I mean, that's all I'm saying.
the width of the
It's
new
a
road
challenge.
is
I mean, I don't
18
wanna
feet.
see, safety, and I'm sure the city is gonna make a judgment on that rather than us. But at the same time, having experience with that myself, if somebody's having an event on our street, sometimes we have to go and ask the people if they could move their cars, because you can't get to your house. So let alone safety. That's when it's safe. So I mean, I'm concerned with that, because it would seem like you're putting pressure then on the city to fix that. Well, I'm saying that, so how can the project go ahead if we have at this point like this? And I'm not against the project, far from it. But I mean, the safety, as far as getting in and out, is there a possibility of it being a one-way? But then you'd have to go through your area, and then that would have to be a city street, right?
Correct.
Okay.
When
So I'm
this
just
street
saying
is,
there's
this
some-
street is wider than Franklin. The proposed street is 18 feet wide.
No, the
So it
street
is-
you're built, but up to Franklin itself, it's not wide.
Can I address this real quick?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a problem to me.
I've talked to the city a little bit, and so here's what we got to keep in mind. In a perfect world, if we're building a new city street, under the subdivision regulations, the pavement has to be 20-foot wide curb gutters. So we end up with a 22-foot wide curb-to-curb face. Back curb, 23-foot wide. But we have streets all over Danville that are less than 20 foot. It does not make them substandard. They're narrow. There's some hard to pass. 18 foot is a passable travel way in any parking lot. That's 2 9-foot lanes. But I think what's interesting is we all understand it's narrow, but we have several homes on Franklin, and the city's of the opinion that they're not looking for the developer to widen the right-of-way to 50 foot and make this 20 foot of pavement. It would deed up everyone's front yards. There'd be property have to be acquired. They don't want to disturb the street. They feel splitting the traffic, the loads then occur to their satisfaction. But you are correct, the city's going to make that decision.
Right.
Now, in my opinion, and this is just layperson, in a perfect world, we would have used a Boffman and came in and made no connection to Franklin, because the street feels narrow, but the city wants 2 access points. One street has the right width, the other street is narrow in width. But we currently have homes there that use that street day, and it is an inconvenience, I'm sure, passing, but it's not fair to say that that's not an adequate street, because that is a street in their inventory that they feel is sufficient, and the city has told them that this is the preferred connection. What we don't have is hard numbers on how the traffic's gonna split, because clearly if you live on this one end, you're probably gonna use one end versus the other. Now, you all could do the reverse of what we heard about this 80%. You guys could say that the access comes from Boffman, and there'll be no connection to Franklin until we're done with the project. And force all the traffic in one direction until we're built out and the natural splits occur. It's not, they would rather develop, pave, and have sort of nice infrastructure, but you guys could say, we prefer to have one access point. This could be developed a lot of different ways, with 2 cul-de-sacs, for example, even. There's a lot of different options, I think, as they play with the lot layouts. But I think we all agree, this is going to impact Franklin. Some number of those homes are going to use that. Some number are going to use the other split. But at this point, there's no plan to widen Franklin. There's not enough right-of-way there. And to get the pavement another 4 or 5 foot wide would impact all those yards.
That said, I agree with that, but at the same time, why would we want to create more substandard roads? Or leave one that creates a substandard road? And like I say, I look at the project, the houses, I think they're great, I think all that's great. It's what it creates outside in this tucked-in piece of land. I have another question about I don't know, I like to go to Sonic and get peanut butter milkshakes. And I can't pull out of there half the time now, okay? Because that means that the light will have to change the length that it's red on which side, which impacts the Houstonville Road traffic, which is already pretty sketchy at times. So, you know, I'm not worried about the project as much as I am its impact on not only that smaller community area, but the larger community, which is one of our concerns of planning and zoning. It's not just looking at the specific little piece of land that they're gonna develop and put these houses on, but what about how it's gonna affect the people who have businesses across the street, over in the little shopping center that has a hard time making it as it is?
I'm gonna sound like
I'm thinking about those things, but
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I'm not gonna say you're wrong, because I don't wanna work for any planning commission and tell any of you guys you're wrong, but I'll just say this. We have a traffic study requirement at
I
a
know.
certain threshold. This doesn't meet the
I see
threshold.
it on there, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Doesn't meet the threshold. If we meet the threshold, then everything's on the table as far as looking at intersections, looking at traffic, looking at access. When we're below that threshold, these are minimal impacts to city streets. Baughman is a minor collector with the right pavement width. Houstonville's a state road. At this point, we can't really get too far off this property and start to talk about impacts out here, because we really have no authority when we don't have a traffic study, at least as that first step off, to review the next access point, the next traffic light, and then ask the developer to mitigate any negative impacts he's making. When we get over that 50 units an acre, or 50 units, 500 trips, we start to have some ability. Clearly, our comprehensive plan gives us direction that we can require a traffic study, and we can ask the developer to mitigate those adverse impacts. 30 homes on 4 acres, you're gonna generate in a single-family dwelling an average 10 trips a day, so you're talking about 300 trips. It's obviously gonna make an impact, but I think this falls then in the jurisdiction of the city of Danville to require whatever they're gonna require of them, and they may make them do something that we're unaware of at this
Well, I
time.
think it's good to bring it up now, because, we know of a lot of communities, including Lexington, who are traffic nightmares because of poor planning. And I can tell you right now, there was never supposed to be any construction where Manamore Boulevard is. That's the way it was developed, that's the way it was passed, and those of you that have been there now see what happened. I mean, and I'm not against the project from a standpoint, but I don't think we should be doing reverse engineering in the future because of the traffic problems we might create, because of something that seems like it's a trickle, and it's not. It's more than a trickle, because it's gonna start affecting the rest of it. And I think the places, like I said, they look fantastic. They look like the kind of place that if I was gonna have a small house, I'd wanna live in, but I'm just worried about what happens externally and how the city is impacted by that. I'm a representative here as part of the city, so I'm thinking about the city as well as just passing ordinances, So the city itself, we don't want to put the city in a place where they have to do some reverse engineering. It's going to cost thousands of dollars that we might have spent on maybe some projects we shouldn't have spent it on already. So the roads, they're going to eventually be responsible for it. The city will be responsible for the ones that are outside the project. So they might have to make decisions based on the approval of this project that they're not ready to make yet, or they don't even know about yet, and I just want to make sure that the traffic study, of course, snow removal and things like that are the project itself, because it's a private road, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's not, but then how will that affect the people that have to use, once their exit, and then the city is gonna have more responsibilities now, because there's more impact on their city roads, the roads we have inside the city. So I'll make sure that, you're able to, those 35 extra people, extra housing units, how is that gonna affect the city's ability to clear the snow from a very small road for all these people who probably park on the street sometimes? Is that true?
Yeah, you have to,
Yeah, that's,
some of the people park
Whoa, yeah, whoa, okay.
If you're gonna talk, you gotta come up
Yeah,
here.
I'm sorry, that's my fault, that's my fault. But I'm just saying, you know, I'm trying to think about the things that impact the city, not just the one little project, which is a nice project, I love it personally, but anyway, that's, and also, where is the third beta testing place? I'd like to see it.
Oh, you're welcome to.
Where
It's
is
at Atlee Avenue in Harrodsburg, Kentucky.
Okay.
We're actually building the exact home. And sir, Mr. am I saying that correctly, DiMartino?
Yes.
Thank you. I deal in data and variables a lot. The variables in which you're trying to connect are pretty out there, just simply from a statistical understanding. You know, we can't control Houstonville Road traffic, even if we wanted to. It's not a variable that's even remotely close to anywhere within our control, whether it's developed or not. I can't control what happens at the Sonic drive-through. If I could, I would. But I do want to share, though, that having two access points in and out divests the traffic in the best way. I also want you to know that I offered to the city to give some of my land, to give it on Franklin Avenue, if that helped to widen the street. I assure you, sir, I'm thinking of, I own property on the 14-foot street. I have a heart for these things, and also, when you think about the metrics, these are 4.218 acres that haven't been developed ever. There's a reason. The economics are tough. You know, to get the math to work, it has to be a pretty precise pathway. And we want to see this project through. And we're blessed to see it through because we really believe that there is a need for affordable housing. I recently helped a young lady try to get a home loan that has $33,000 of student loan debt, and she wasn't eligible. And it was a $175,000 home, which is about the most inexpensive brand-new home you can find on the market right now. We want to combat that with efficient, high-ceiling, 3-bed, 2-bath homes that provide a high caliber of life and a high quality of living, and we're doing our very best to do so. And some of your remarks are they're just simply not corollary in a manner that we're able to control. If we had the ability to control some of these variables, we would try.
The only answer is that I believe what you're saying, except that we have to consider more than just your project, because we deal with the people outside and around your project. So that's the only reason I bring those up, because that's one of our charges.
Oh, absolutely. And we seek to see the city school system grow in both revenue and in the ability to maintain a healthy populace of students. We seek to see the city of Danville to grow. We seek to see greater opportunities come to this community. My wife and I were blessed to move here in 2015, and we've called it home. I promise we've been very active in the marketplace. Tanner can probably attest to that. But what we're looking to do is doable. What we can do might become undoable if the pendulum weighs too much on the cost side, because this is we're looking at a $5 million cumulative project here that has a very narrow margin of error. And we're willing to, that's a reason the property hasn't been developed. To be such high quality land in the city limits and to be undeveloped. This is, I believe, the third attempt to develop this land. The first two did not work due to costs. So our desire is to make this work. Our desire to have roadways in and out to make it work. I'm going to maintain the road. That's not the city's responsibility. That's mine, and I own that. And if I could widen Franklin, I would, but it's not possible. The houses are too close to the road. And I don't know if Nathan has anything to add on the engineering side.
We've not got into the engineering a lot yet, but just what makes this project lean towards the back, towards Franklin, is that sanitary's got to go there. Otherwise, it's got to be pumped to the Boffman, which adds a huge expense. And if you develop the drive off of Boffman first and then construct on that, you're basically building the road twice because you're tearing it up the first time. So that just kind of lends to that. Again, I've not got into the engineering a whole lot, so I'll answer any questions that you got to the best of my ability.
How wide did you say the road was gonna be, the Boffman Road, the exit off Boffman? 18 feet?
18.
On to Boffman?
No, your road.
Your road, off Boffman.
Your road.
From the connection to Franklin, it's gonna be 18 feet, and then it narrows down to 12 feet to go to Boffman. That was the suggestion for the engineers, city engineers.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak in opposition to this proposed project? State your name and address.
My name's Charles Hinkle. I live at 128 Franklin Avenue. If he narrows the street to 12 feet, he's got Franklin Street all over again.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Can we close the public hearing and
Yeah.
have discussion?
Well, just one more question, I guess, of the engineer. Well, why again did you say it narrowed down to 12 feet at the Boffman?
That was the recommendation of the city, sir. We're just following precisely what the city recommended. Again, our job is to do precisely what the bodies of authority over us ask us to do. Our job is also to do it in a manner that is cost effective. So that's what we're seeking to do and seeking to balance. In regard to this gentleman's question, I mean, we'd be happy to provide easement access to all of the neighbors to use the private road, if that helps them through their thoroughfaring in and out. I think some of the interesting facets of this conversation are that what we're proposing actually increases accessibility. It does not decrease. But it seems that much of the language in which we're speaking about is suggestive that we're decreasing accessibility, when in fact, we're actually doubling it, because we're providing additional ways in and out. We're providing additional ways in and out for city fire, ambulances. And I agree with this gentleman. I would be concerned if if the house that my wife and I own caught on fire. I would be concerned, just as a property owner. I'd want to make sure my insurance was good, and make sure that my tenants were safe. But what we're providing actually provides a guaranteed safe access for these city vehicles. And so the topic of accessibility and road navigation in a negative light, I struggle with personally, because what we're actually doing is increasing accessibility, and we're increasing it in arguably a pretty mighty way.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any questions from the commission? Mr. Hunter, you care to add anything to this?
I'm done. I think at this point, you all deliberate, motion up or down. Henry's there to assist you with whatever. If there is a positive motion, I think we want to make sure that additional language gets attached on the 5 years or whatever y'all, or if there's other things you guys want to add through your deliberation. I'm done unless y'all have any questions for me.
Well, I mean, I'm curious why the city narrowed the road, but I mean, if that's what they say, that's what they
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
And
they met with-
We're deferring to them on that anyway, so.
Yeah.
I guess my point would be, I think Mr. Carter made a good point. He is adding another way in and out of Franklin, if he's so willing to let
Yeah.
that go forward. And I guess the other thing that hasn't been mentioned, but, there's 3 ways to get off Boffman once you get on Boffman. So, I mean, you
Waveland.
can disperse in 3 different directions, so I think that point needs to be made. But I think, the people who live in this area are going, common sense is gonna prevail where they go. I mean, so I think they'll disperse, in all the options they have, and everybody's not gonna go one direction.
Yeah. I can't answer the Baughman narrowing of the travelway, but I think that, again, Danville's going to have to give them encroachment permits to get into their right-of-way at the Baughman and Franklin side. And it may have been access management driveway to driveway in that location, because Aspen is also in close proximity there to the east. So they may just not wanted an 18-foot wide travelway in that, but there's enough width there to put 18-foot and continue that travelway uniformly through there. But I think that we're going to have to trust the city of Danville on the engineering side, because that's their jurisdiction with this travelway. But all we can do is, if you all choose, is to make them commit, they'll do two, and then Danville will control how that works into that area.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I think as Terry suggested, I think they still need to develop a time period when they will pay the Baughman access rather than when something's complete.
5 years and 15 feet.
Do that what?
We'll do that in the motion. You
Okay.
agreed to 5 years.
One more thing. I think the reason we originally had the cul-de-sac when we went, what's the other guy's name? Earl and John Castle, is that we had a cul-de-sac at the time, and they wanted the access, and I think it was to push the traffic out that way rather than to invite it in for the narrower. But I agree 12 foot is a little bit too narrow, and I think a 14 or 15, at least matching Franklin, would be better for that narrowed area.
So was the city's 12 foot a minimum, or did they say you can't make it any wider than that?
That was just
So that was just a recommendation.
And I can't speak on behalf of them, as they're not here. I can just speak third hand from being in the meeting myself. But in regard to the commitment to paving, I want to answer very specifically the questions addressed. We're happy to have an addendum to the conditions that commit to it being paved at the 5-year mark from January 1, 2020. So it's January 1, 2025. We'll be happy to commit to pave by that point. In addition, we'd be happy to commit to a 15-foot roadway through Baughman. We'd be happy to commit that as an addendum as well. And I believe this is a recorded meeting. It is recordable, if I'm not mistaken. I learned that from the last meeting. And also my counsel is here if he needs to aid in any way. But we're happy to make those commitments now, and if approval happens, we'll be happy to get those addendums to you before end of day today.
But if you develop 80% in the first 2 years.
Oh,
we'll
it'll
go
be
ahead
paved in
and
2.
pave.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're just saying, you've got an end date with a marker.
Dr. Carter, we're talking about this 80% mark. What are we judging that by? One of these concept plans that we've seen?
Yes, so, with the not to exceed 35 properties, we won't go off of that if the final plan is less than that.
Mm-hmm.
So we would just mathematically derive it from, if it's 31 properties, we would just arithmetically derive that from the completion of whatever the rounded up to 80% mark is, as the math may not be precise. But if you get to the 78.5% mark, we, at that point.
Number of houses is
Yes,
what we're talking
correct.
about. Okay.
And we will get a plat.
Mhm.
We'll have to have a plat at some point, and we'll know exactly how many units will be on the property.
Right.
Okay, do I have a motion? Do I have a question?
I think it's an unfair comparison, Mr. DiMartino, between man-of-war traffic in Lexington and your wait time for a milkshake at Sonic.
Well,
I therefore make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together, conditioned upon the general development plan, conditions submitted by the applicant, and also to include a 15-foot width at Baughman Avenue that will be completed within 5 years or 80% development, whichever occurs first. And based on the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing and proposed zoning map amendment, is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan, is demonstrated by the compliance with the following items, is consistent with the future land use map. Therefore, the proposed zoning amendment is in agreement and adopted, is is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that the motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at the public hearing.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Commissioner Bowie. We have a
I'll
motion.
second. I'll second.
Commissioner Mann, we have a second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you.
And again, as you all know, that's just a recommendation. City then has to take action, and then it goes where the city chooses to take it. But you all just provide a recommendation to the city of Danville at this point.
Number 4, Apex Rentals LLC has filed a future land use map amendment from agricultural and commercial to mixed use employment for property located at 3025 Stanford Road, Danville, Kentucky.
All righty, so we got a lot of cases here, so we'll keep on rolling. Again, this is an application that's got some unique characteristics to it. Nancy's here, she worked on this, on the zoning plat. Zach Gammons is somewhere, there's Zach over here with Apex Plumbing. What's happening here on Stanford Road, there's a building that's obviously been out there for a long time, and there's a church next door. Mr. Gammons is asking for a future land use map. Initially, he was asking for a zone change request, and we noticed that the future land use map is this. So, like we haven't got into a lot yet, we're going to work on a future land use map, but we've got problems around the Danville area with the future land use, and this is a prime example. The future land use in this part of the county is agriculture where there's a church, commercial on top of an industrial building, agriculture in the backyard, commercial on a vacant farm, and then single-family development comes up and touches here, then back to agriculture, back to single-family. Just a hodgepodge of future land use categories with no consistency on a state road that's 4 lanes wide. That building's been there for years. It's been somewhat disrepair. It's been a staging ground for Enbridge after the gas line explosion. It's been a disaster. Zach's been cleaning that up, or said Zach, Mr. Gammon's been cleaning that up. He runs a plumbing business. It's pretty straightforward here, and he wants to relocate his plumbing business into this industrial building. Here's where the challenge comes in. Here's the zoning map. The zoning that when it was done historically on this property was only zoned on a portion of the property. In fact, the front yard, the zoning line catches the driveway, and then it's agriculture, and then tapers back out. So it was just commercial on the footprint. And then, of course, the commercial runs all the way down the bypass and across the road where the city has the Welcome to Danville sign is zoned highway business. So I guess McDonald's could go there, but right across the street still all zoned agriculture, even though there's single-family dwellings. And then the church is in an ag zone when it's clearly a commercial use too. The commercial then tapers back to the single-family, but the property that currently is owned has some little floodplain, but has split zoning. Clearly, it's not a farm. They're not farming this back part of this 11 acres. It's been a commercial development. It's had uses in it historically that predate me. I'm not sure what all's been on the property. But one of the big changes that we've made in 2001 with the zoning ordinance is we created industrial categories, light and heavy, as well as the industrial business development. And there are certain uses that historically in the city of Danville, we put in commercial zones that clearly are industrial in nature. A contractor-related business now is an industrial service. A mulch business. There's certain things that we historically put in commercial zones that are industrial in nature. And they couldn't go in the IBD district because you had to have large amounts of land and develop in a campus-like environment. But if you wanted to be a muffler shop or do a body shop, we have a whole list of what we now call industrial services. Some of them are different, but we no longer allow those in the highway business zone. So if this had been looked at before January 1, we would allow the plumbing supply business to go in that building because it's zoned highway business. But now, today, it needs to be light industrial to accommodate the use that Mr. Gammons currently is in. He also has split zoning on this property and has no need for the agricultural zoning that sits on that property. He liked it to be zone 1 district. Commercial would have been fine if he could put the plumbing business in the commercial zoning, but light industrial is the best fit under our zoning ordinance. So again, 2 steps here. The future land use map is not in compliance. It's commercial. We did not think and again, we sort of guided this a little bit with him. The first step is he needs to amend the future land use map procedurally because he's asking for industrial zoning, and the future land use, as you can see, it doesn't even match the zoning, is all commercial. We did not want to see the future land use map go to industrial. You can see the categories here that we have. We like the mixed use employment, and we sort of suggested that would be a more appropriate flume request because we're working on the Danville future land use map, and our targeted area out here is probably going to be a mixed category, not a specific industrial or commercial category. But clearly the commercial future land use that was laid out at some point in time just here and doesn't even get back towards Ghost Pike where we have, it's just odd. We just laid commercial in one little path and then put single family behind it. We're going to look at the whole area of Danville, and we're working on the bypass first. And the mixed use employment we think is a better fit because then the zoning districts that can evolve in that can be commercial, light industrial, office, multifamily. It's kind of a flex district. So we suggested the flume request ought to be mixed use employment as a starting point, but the zoning request, to be clear, would be going from highway business and agriculture to light industrial. So I'm going to do these things kind of together. They're really 2 separate cases, and I'm going to walk through the flume case really fast. But the way we look at the flume amendments, again, is our comprehensive plan, and we have to look at the applicant's zoning request and development conditions to really know if the flume request is compatible. So I'm going to start with that, and again, you should have the flume staff report. I mentioned Apex Rental LLC is the applicant. This is 11.460 acres. Current flume is ag and zone, and the proposed flume would be mixed-use employment, and I just described that. Won't go through this real quick, but page 2, 3 of your staff report talks about our comprehensive plan. So a flume request or future land use map request, we have very specific language on how we amend our future land use map. And the way we amend our future land use map is to look at our goals and objectives, and then Chapter 9 lays out a very specific process on how we amend the future land use, and that's outlined on page 4 of your staff report. So an applicant has 3 options to amend their future land use. They can either show that it's going to be a major employment generator. We did one of those a couple months back, or that the map is just wrong. Clearly, the map's kind of wrong, but unfortunately the map, there it is, and it was adopted at some point back in '07, before, whatever, not even looked at in 2017, but there's our future land use map for the south side of Danville. The third bullet is the one that really, where the rubber meets the road, which is the applicant has to show that the proposed future land use is clearly compatible with the existing surrounding development demonstrated by the applicant. Well, how do they do that? They do that by showing you beforehand what their development conditions are going to be. So in the staff's opinion, what our comprehensive plan now does in Article 9 is any kind of use can go next to anything if they can make it compatible. And how do they achieve compatibility? That's the development conditions. So your development conditions are listed on page 5. And by the way, the applicant submitted a short little narrative about the property being in disrepair. It historically has been in industrial use, but because it's industrial was allowed in commercial, it's what it was. Today, he needs light industrial. So there's been a lot of protocol here. 2 applications had to be filed, surveyor had to be hired, but had he got in here last summer, he could have moved the plumbing business in and it had been grandfathered in. He wants his own light industrial because he feels it's the best fit for the future. So here's his development conditions on page 7. They're good. They're really good, in fact. In a project like this, because it is 11 acres, and there is kind of the what else could come next. Number 1 says applicant agrees to no more than 75% total lot coverage through the property. Industrial lets you cover a whole bunch more than that. He's committing that some of this will stay green. He's committed to a maximum building square foot. At this point, his goal is to move into the building, move Apex Plumbing into this property. He has equipment, he has trucks, he has employees. He's going to pave some parking. This becomes the main office for Apex Plumbing. But he puts a building cap and a height cap that are below what the industrial zone also allows on 11 acres. He's agreeing to one freestanding sign or monument sign. The sign's limited to no more than 15 feet or 96 square feet. That's way smaller than signs we typically see in commercial zones up and down the bypass. That's shorter by half, in fact. And he may not do any signage in the short term, that's kind of up to him, but he did make a commitment on any future signage. He's also agreed to install a 20-foot, so double the requirement, landscape buffer along the church side or a privacy fence, and maintain a natural 20-foot buffer on the western side where there's already a tree line. Mr. Gammons is a little more proactive than that. He's met with the church. They've talked about the fence. There's kind of a pretty rusted chain link fence in disrepair there too. His goal is to improve the property. They've been working on the building. If you've gone by, all the Enbridge stuff is gone except for construction trailer at this time. The property's being cleaned up. But he's gonna work with the church and do whatever screening they want on that eastern side between him and the church. The church may be here to discuss that, but I believe they've talked amongst themselves about what they want on the property as a next door neighbor. All the rest of the properties on all other sides is undeveloped at this time. He's agreed that it will be connected to sanitary sewer, and I believe it is already, not 100% sure. But he's gonna connect the sewer. And then he put some things in here that this was a little bit at our urging too. You know, we take some liberties with these conditions. But I suggested, Mr. Gammons, when you do light industrial, and one of the commissioners, you guys called me about what is light industrial, what could it be? A lot of things can go in light industrial. Some of them aren't pretty. Some of them can be even unsightly. That's not his goal. This is gonna be an office and plumbing supply business. So you can either say what you're gonna be, or you can say what you won't allow to happen on the property. And he chose the prohibited list. And number 6 says applicant agrees no adult entertainment. That's not bingo for seniors. That's none of whatever that is, we're not doing it there. But light industrial does allow it by default. No automobile-related repair, no petroleum services, junkyard, salvage yard, truck stop, heavy equipment repair business, or packaged liquor sales would be allowed on the property. All those things are allowed in industrial besides, again, he's a contractor, and what's intended to be on the property is a contractor-related business and associated uses and storage that would occur with his business. And then the last one, the applicant agrees all future utilities shall be located and placed underground. So again, page 6, no staff items of concern. The flume, if approved, opens up the door to move forward with the zone change in the next case. And again, I won't have to go through those conditions, but this is a future land use map step first. If you see fit, you guys are final action on that. The zone change, if approved, then would have to go to the city of Danville. That's the last thing I'll mention. This has all been annexed recently into the city of Danville. The property used to kind of go here and kind of move up and down. The city has done about a 400-acre annexation in this area recently. All this is now in the city of Danville, including the church. So if the zone change is successful, this would have to go to the city of Danville to be ratified through two readings of an ordinance. Again, Nancy Estes is here, who did all the technical work with her folks, and Zach's here if you need to ask him any questions, and there may be some neighbors, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys might have. And this is on the future land use map amendment as a first step.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to add to what Mr. Hunter has said? Anyone in favor?
It doesn't matter, either in favor, it's a question.
Okay. Name and address, please.
Yep.
Neil Eklund, Winterhawk Road. Since this is off of the bypass, I assume there is sufficient room between that building and the bypass so that a frontage road could be created for all of those, no?
No, I'll explain that to you.
So we're gonna have a whole bunch of little
No.
driveways?
No, that's not how it's gonna work. So that is a state-controlled access road, and those cuts were put in when the road was developed. You can see them to the north. So there could be a frontage road, but it is not the planning commission or the staff's desire to see a frontage road 30, 50 foot back off and create the problems we've got on Skywatch now. If there's a road developed someday, and we'll use the north, these access points, and we have some kind of road, the layman's term is a backage road. That's not the term. It's called a reverse frontage road. If there are any road connections across this real estate someday, we're gonna want those deep to the rear to not to create those jam points that we do when we create frontage roads along state roads, like we did on Skywatch, you get the problems that we have at these access points. So if there's ever connectivity between access points, because the state is only gonna allow certain driveways, so if all this property develops someday, the state's already said where there won't be driveways, they're not gonna allow it. If there's joint projects, they'll have to interconnect by new roads, and we're gonna want those back probably 400 feet at the least, to create those rear frontage roads to give us the stacking space that we can have. Frontage roads are, this community hasn't really dove into them, but coming from a community that built a bunch of them and then took them all out after they all failed, I'm telling you, that's not something we want to lead into, because they do not work putting frontage roads 20 to 50 foot behind these major state highways when they max out. So those are the access points the state's allowed, and I seriously doubt they're going to deviate from those. Where those median cuts are, those are pretty laid out for the future.
Anyone want to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Okay, not seeing any. Any discussion?
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
I'll make a motion that we approve to approve the proposed future land use map amendment based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed flume amendment has met the directive to amend the flume as outlined in Chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witness at this public hearing.
Okay, Commissioner Manning has made a motion. Commissioner DiMartino has seconded.
Mr. Baird, if I might jump in and
Yes, sir.
just add in terms of compliance and conformity with the surrounding area and with the comp plan, that the prior use of the property supports the proposed land use category, and that the adjacent infrastructure can handle the burden that would be placed on it by any uses that would be in that land use category. Is that an agreeable addition to your motion?
Right?
What he said.
Yeah, what he said.
Thank you.
Yes, do we need to restate not restate it, but just remake, just motion approved? Okay, and we got a second? Okay. All right, all in favor? Motion passes. Apex Rentals LLC has filed an application to rezone property on tract of land containing 11.460 acres located at 3025 Stanford Road. The requested zone changes from agricultural and highway business to light industrial.
So, this is how this works when they come in joint like this. I just went through everything. Again, page 1, your staff report outlines the acres, outlines the request to light industrial. That is a new zoning category that was created in January 1. The conditions I just read, and they're attached to the zone change request also. And those conditions, by the way, will be signed, formal conditions that get recorded in the courthouse with a land use certificate put in the deed books if they're approved. I won't go through the staff report again. We did look at the comprehensive plan goals and objectives for the zone change. We looked through, again, the conditions. Our staff report's a little different because we also have some what we call development review provisions on page 4 and 5, and all of those have been met. Those are specific policies that have to be addressed with zone change requests, and we looked at not only the industrial ones, but the commercial ones, and those are addressed with the conditions that the applicant submitted. So again, put the zoning map up, because there's what the zoning is: highway, business, and agriculture, and some floodplain. And as you guys went out there, the ridge goes up. So the floodplain's at the bottom, and at the backside of the floodplain, we're going up the hill pretty steep. And so the request would be going from that to light industrial on the map. And again, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I brought the use chart from the zoning ordinance as well as the industrial service description, if you guys aren't sure what light industrial is and what it could be. Again, the applicants legislated out several things, but I do have the master list here to tell you what light industrial is intended to be. So again, the applicant's requesting that to move Apex Plumbing to this site on Stanford Road. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I won't duplicate the conditions. They're in your staff report from the flume case. And applicants here if you guys have any questions.
Does the applicant wish to add anything to Anyone want to speak in favor of this zone change? Anyone wish to speak in opposition to the zone change? Not seeing any. Do you care to make a motion? I will. Okay.
I would make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan conditions submitted by the applicant. Based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the following items. It is consistent with the future land use map. It is consistent with the adopted goals and objectives. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Henry, or wish to add anything to this?
Yes, just that the applicant's proposed conditions give adequate protection to surrounding parcels that are of different zoning categories.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Boyd seconds. All in favor? Motion passes.
So did I mention we made a big deposit last month? We had a lot of cases filed.
Tanner and Rachel Good have filed a future land use map amendment for agricultural mixed-use residential property located at 4169 Lexington Road, Danville, Kentucky.
Yeah, so there are a lot of cases came in, and this one is a unique one. We didn't hold it last on purpose, the way they were filed, the way they got on the agenda. This case is also a future land use map amendment as well as a zone change request. So this is the area we're talking about here, Lexington Road. This is a little grocery store out in the county. There's a property right here, and then the property right next door is what we're talking about. And there's a house, best described as a house kind of built into a mound or a hillside if you went out there. House has been there for a long time. That's the aerial shot of the property. Again, we got the application on February 5th. This is 4169 Lexington. The property is just over a half acre. And again, the zoning is actually agriculture. This is the future land use, but I'll go to the zoning first. Again, maybe unique to our county sometimes, but that zoning line is very strange, but we have commercial zoning out here. This property is zoned agriculture, even though it's a half acre property. Everything's zoned agriculture out in the county. Back in the day, we cut off lots less than 1 acre. It's clearly not an active farm or an agriculture production. It's a half acre ag tract with a single family dwelling, basically. Very similar to what's next door, although this property actually has highway business tagged out on it. So the zoning that was done whenever did not match any property lines that were developed over time. So this commercial zoning actually extends onto 4 different parcels. And it's just out there. It's highway business zoning, which is the most intense commercial zoning you could have. So tomorrow something could go right here and it's already zoned commercial, and it could be whatever, retail. What the applicant is asking for is office professional zoning. It's a new category we created. We used to have it back in the day before the 02-04 ordinance. The old ordinance had office professional. The unique thing about an office professional zoning is it by default limits what can be on the property. No retail, no industrial, no fast food. It's office use only. And in this request is specifically for a real estate office. Mr. Tanner Good is a realtor, and his intention is to move his real estate business to this location. May look a little odd, why out in the county, why there? He serves multiple counties, and he has indicated to me, just talking, that's the first question I asked. I said, that's kind of out in the county. Seems a little odd you'd have a real estate office. He said, well, I do a lot of work in Garrett and Jessamine and Lincoln, and it's perfectly located to get me in all directions. And it's a house in disrepair that I'd like to fix up and make it a small real estate office. So that's the flume/zoning request. 2 steps again. The future land use map has to technically be amended. And let me explain just briefly what we tell applicants. Here's the future land use. Again, it doesn't match the zoning, but the future land use is commercial agriculture, yet we have single family dwellings. And our agricultural future land use is all over the county, and that's fine. But clearly, half-acre lots, this one's even smaller than a half-acre residential lots, zoned agriculture or future land use agriculture, seems a little counterintuitive to some degree, but that is what we have a whole neighborhood that would like us to convert their neighborhood that's zoned agriculture, their single-family dwellings on half-acre lots. It's clearly not a farm, it's not an agricultural production, doesn't even meet the definition of our agricultural district in our current zoning ordinance. It's not even an acre. So what Mr. Good would like to do, unfortunately, when they come in and say, I'd like to zone a piece of property, we look at it and go, future land use map, you're not in compliance. So the applicant has two choices. They can either amend the map, or they can kind of move ahead and say, I'm going to ignore the map and make my request, take my chances, or make the major changes argument, which wasn't much there that we saw. So he had to make a decision, do I file two applications and procedurally amend the map first as a first step to go on to the next step, which is a zone change request to office professional. So again, just like the prior case, I'm going to spend a tad bit more time on the flume than I will the zone change if we get that far. And the first thing we do is look at our goals and objectives on page 2 and 3. And clearly there's some goals and objectives that would tend to support a flume amendment of this type as well as a rezoning. And I listed those under general land development, economic development, and land use. And then on page 3 of your staff report, the future land use, we very specifically now have an amendable future land use map. We no longer have a static future land use map that we don't look at for 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's an amendable map that if the applicant can show the request is compatible with the comprehensive plan and with the surrounding area, the map can be amended. And the beauty of the map being amended is it assists us to relabel things more accurately in the county. So again, the future land use map request that Mr. Good requested, again, with a little urging of the staff, was another mixed category. We weren't real comfortable with, even though this is already commercial, we weren't real comfortable with making the future land use map just flat commercial, because it could open up to maybe a different zoning of some other day. We suggested the mixed-use residential because we feel it's more appropriate. There is a residential structure. This would allow a commercial business as well as it to stay a residence if that ever goes back the other direction. And I want to go back and point to the zoning map again. The zoning map actually jumps onto the neighboring property, so the future land use and the zoning don't even coincide at this point. So we have commercial zoning to ag zoning. And so the applicant is asking for the mixed-use residential future land use category as a precursor to asking for office professional zoning in the zone change request. And again, there were 5 conditions submitted, and I'll read those on page 5 of your staff report and what the applicant's committing to prove that he's compatible with the surrounding area. And again, that's something you guys will have to judge. Number 1 says the applicant agrees to provide no more than 50% lot coverage. So again, in a commercial zoning district, you can cover up a whole lot more of the property in pavement, buildings, rooftops, whatever. He's committing that no more than 50% would be developed, although I don't think there's any indication that he'd even get that far. And that's because of number 2. The applicant's agreeing that the total building area shall not exceed 4,000 square foot and no buildings on the property be more than 2 stories. So again, he's committed to whatever happens on that house. His goal is to rehab the house and make an office. But the max build-out would be no more than a big single-family dwelling that would ever sit on a half-acre lot. We would allow a 2-story house. We'd allow, 4,000 square foot house. There's a double wide that just went in next door. I think it's 2,400 square foot. So he's committed in the lot coverage and the building cap on what can happen. Number 3 deals with signage. He's committed that the signage would be very modest, and there would be no internal illuminated sign. There wouldn't be a backlit sign inside. It would be externally illuminated, and it would only be 10 foot and 64 square feet. So that's a fairly small sign, much smaller signage than the convenience store has right next door. Number 4 says applicant agrees to install a 20-foot wide vegetated buffer on the western property line or fence. Again, got a neighbor that's next door that may have a wish or concern. So the applicant's agreeing to a double wide buffer or fence, and that would be something they'd work out with the neighbor. And then on the other sides, they're going to maintain and screen as required by the zoning ordinance. Number 5 is the big one. This is office zoning, so again, an office could be a CPA, could be a real estate office, could be a medical office, could be all kinds of different professional offices, a web development company. He's committed very narrowed down. The applicant agrees only a real estate office will be permitted on the property. So no other use could be provided, no retail sales. If he moves out someday, a doctor couldn't go back in, it's only a real estate office. And then the last one says, any new or expanded employee parking area shall be paved, and additionally, all utilities or things would be put underground. So those are the 6 conditions that the applicant agreed to that, again, aren't really part of the future land use case other than to show you how he's going to achieve compatibility on the project. The zone change request then has those same conditions. But I'll let Mr. Good and his wife maybe speak for themselves. Their goal is to put a real estate office at this location on Lexington Road, improve that structure that's there. I'm not familiar with the insides or what it's about, but the goal is to move a real estate office that's currently located in Danville into this property and improve the existing house, not build a new structure at this time. So I'll be glad to answer any other questions related to the future land use map request, as well as the applicants here to answer any questions you might have, and there may be neighbors here that have concerns or questions also.
Okay. Anyone want to add to the presentation?
You got one for me?
Question. So is that a house on the west side?
This one?
Adjoining? No. Is that, okay, then on the east side. Yeah.
That house burned or was moved, and the property owners bought a double wide, just got a permit, and
Okay.
should be backing it into, I don't know what day they'll pull it in forward, but I like to laugh about we back mobile homes in, but
I got a question.
yes,
I'm sitting here looking at these 2 lots.
yeah.
It looks like the line, this lot, is that the lot line?
So here's the property, and AGE is here, Dale's here. This is the survey, and the PVA's map that I use a lot and show is sometimes hard. Here is the survey drawing that shows, this is it, shows those driveways, how they function, how they're joint to some degree, and there's the plat. That's the zoning plat, and it shows the structures. So Dale may want to speak to that, but all the structures are on this track.
Because this map we're looking at, it's going right through the.
Yeah, there, and that's hard to see right there, but there's the rooftops shown and the parking areas, travel ways, how they function. The red line outlines the 0.6 acre tract.
Setbacks and all that.
Yeah, it's all existing,
All
so.
right.
And again, Tanner's here and Dale's here if you guys have any questions of them.
Anyone wish to speak? I'm sorry, if you're going to ask a question, you need to address the board.
Neil Eklund, Winterhawk. Are they on septic?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak in favor of this proposal? Please state your name and address, please.
Hello again, Wesley Carter, 121 Berwick Drive, Danville, Kentucky, 40422. I just want to speak to the character of Tanner. I've worked with Tanner for several years. I don't believe that he would do anything that would hinder or hurt any property. I believe he's a very good young man. He's incredibly talented. The kid sold a lot of homes. Well, he's a kid. He's about we're the same age. He's sold a lot of homes, and he's done an outstanding job. Also like to see development down 34. It just helps enhance the continued growth of Boyle County collectively as we begin to grow out towards Jessamine. I think that's a good thing just in general. But thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Seeing none, anyone wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? Please state your name and address, please.
I'm Sarah Volkamp, 875 Shadeland, Danville. I realize this is just a small parcel, but I do have some concerns about this. We've seen several projects today and over the past year or so also of amending the future land use map and then rezoning. many have involved agricultural spaces and agricultural designations. I just want to remind you, well, actually, I'm going to start out saying thank you again for your support of our very successful conference that we had in November that did emphasize smart growth principles. And I think you will agree it's still having ramifications in our community. I see references to it with the EDP and other places. Here's just a recent newspaper article, Boyle Leaders Hope Smart Growth Principles Help Housing. But in that conference, one of the things that was brought out and people seem to agree with, that we do want to protect our green spaces, and agriculture is so important in our community to both Danville and all of Boyle County. And we do want a balance between development and preservation. We certainly want growth, but we want to be careful. I think this is such an exciting and important time for our city and our county. Steve has mentioned several times that we're going to be revising the future land use map. Yes, it needs revising. He's pointed out all these inconsistencies, and we need to go about it in a very careful and thoughtful way. But I do think, and also we are getting ready, just in March, we're going to have this report on the master plan for the city of Danville. I think all of you probably met with Jim Walters, with Bravura. It was very impressive the way they've gone about that. And that's going to make some recommendations all the way out South Fourth. We have a new city manager who is bringing some fresh ideas. And involved in that, the same article, and I'm assuming that all of you have read it because our advocate messenger does such a good job with all our local issues. But he talks about planning and zoning, Mr. Milleron does in that article, and I hope you saw it, where the long-range planning is so important. And then since housing has been brought up, I hope you read the chair of the EDP, Marty Gibson's comments about the need for strong data before we just assume what kind of housing we need. So I'll just go back to my original thing. I do have concerns about this project. I think it opens the door to some commercial things. In a way, it bothers me that it can only be a real estate. I mean, what if that goes out of business and there that sits? But I'm not strongly opposed to it, but I just feel like we have the future land use map revisions coming down the pike. Do we have to jump into some of these things before we get this map straightened out? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition? Not seeing any. We can close the public hearing part of this. Any other discussion or questions from the Land and Zoning Commission?
I guess I just have a concern about, these three lots. One's on either side, or I understand they're all three zoned agricultural, but they're being used as residential lots. And then plopping a mixed-use residential, some type of commercial operation right between two homeowners. I put myself in either one of their shoes.
Yeah. So I'll just turn to my zoning ordinance, or our zoning ordinance. Clearly, an office professional zone is a transitional zone between residential and commercial. That's what it's intended to be. That's the staging. It could be on the bypass, but it could also be in a neighborhood. It's low intensity. It makes small visual impacts in the sense that this one's going to keep the house in play, but an office, low traffic generator, no retail, business hours, typically not open on weekends. So I think as a use, the office professional zone, new to us, works fine in any neighborhood setting. But if it was a 6-story office or the hospital, then there's that change. But in this case, the office professional zone, the mixed-use residential future land use category is a targeted area that is for residential and commercial or any combination. it's the best fit, we thought, as opposed to just doing straight commercial out here, even though that's what's next door. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're just doing this, future land use map for that part, that particular part?
Just that parcel.
Okay, as I look at the parcel to the west of it, that parcel
Yeah.
looks like 25% of it
Yeah.
is already
Zone commercial.
or the future land use map for it is commercial.
Yeah.
So that person already has, I would say, a very strong argument if they want, if they came and said, we want a commercial zone there.
Yeah, they could.
So what we're doing is, we're softening that.
That's right.
We're setting a precedent that piece of property probably should be zoned equal to the one to the east of it, not to the one to the west of it.
Or future land use in that right category. And so, Ms. Von Camp made a comment, it's not 100% accurate. I'm not, at this point, even looking at the county future land use map. We're just gonna look at the Danville future land use map. That's what we're working on now. The county map, at this point, we're kind of gonna leave alone. It's mostly ag, it's got all these weird spots. But in this one case, if I was to do a fix, this is a perfect example where you might put a little bit of that mixed-use development, probably over top of that store too. The best labeling for future land use out in this part of the county, the store is already there, would probably be to do what our chair's suggestion is, to take this mixed-use residential and just drop it at that kind of little node in the county where we have this little commercial node happening. And that would be there, and then from there, we transition back to agriculture. That's something we would probably want to do out in the Parksville area too. There's obviously parts of the county that commercial is fine. No one's talking about streaming commercial all up and down these state roads, but there are parts in the county that would make perfect sense to have these little commercial nodes on the future land use map that serve communities in some form or fashion, kind of in the low impact way. And that mixed use residential category is one I would probably choose because it's residential, commercial, or any combination. But to go straight commercial, straight industrial, or the more intense, you open up the door to bigger, more intense development. But this is a prime example where I'm more concerned about that commercial future land use, but it really doesn't matter because we already got highway business zoning over 3/4 of these 3 lots that we can't control. If tomorrow Hardee's wanted to go right there, it's zoned, ready to go, move in, ready.
I guess it also Mrs. Ballcamp's, but she addressed, I totally lost my train of thought.
So at this point, the mixed-use residential, although it would be on this one lot, you are correct. In the perfect world, we would have done the center lot too. But we didn't have 2 applicants coming forward, and we're not putting forward any recommendation on the flume other than what the applicant submitted.
I had a senior moment.
Yep.
She mentioned that we're restricting this property to a real estate office. So, and I guess to answer her question, or if someone in the future wanted to
Live
bought
there?
that property or did something with it other than a real estate office, they would have to
Come back, yeah, yeah.
and get a zone change.
Have to amend the conditions, and it feels just like a zone change. So it can't be anything but a real estate office. And the OP zoning actually allows apartments and accessory apartments. So the real estate office could actually have someone residing there. If someone wanted to live in the real estate office and run it, they could still do that. But the goal is it stays a residential structure with a real estate business in there.
I have a question.
Okay.
So how far from this property is the golf course?
Let me zoom out. I don't know, there's the edge, the zoning you see. Again, the property in between Old Bridge, again, the lady's putting the manufactured home in this general location. You see the edge, the R1A. By the way, the R1A is a sewer district, 1/4 acre lots. All of that's really mislabeled too. In the perfect world, that should be rural residential or even agriculture. That was actually zoned GRA, which is 1/4 acre lots, which, as we know, really won't work on septic tanks either. But we got so all of Old Bridge was zoned single family, but the golf course was left all agricultural zoning. So you can see it right there.
So
There's
just that one property with the double wide that's in
yeah,
between.
the lady bought it's put a double wide on it. Yeah, correct. It's a new one.
That's fine.
I'd like to make a statement about the property itself, just so you all are more familiar.
Please, Name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So basically, that property, when you drive.
Name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tanner Good, Black Tie Real Estate, 120 North 3rd Street, citizens of Danville. That property is that little berm house when you drive by. From what I understand, it used to be used as an office by Marion Webb. You know, he's deceased now, so I don't know the facts on that. But what we would like to do is use that as our hub, maybe 3-4 cars at a time, if that. We drive a lot of miles in the real estate business. It's more or less a place to gather, you know, do computer work, office work, back on the road. So just think of the State Farm building in town. I know this is kind of a taboo area, but for us, it's a great commuter spot. It's not going to be something that looks like a nuisance. It's going to look clean. It's going to look modern. Most people won't even notice. So it'll look much better than what
Mr.
it is
Good,
now.
how many employees do you have, Mr. Good?
I'm sorry. We have, I think, 12 right now.
Okay.
But they do not have office space. It's just a place for meetings.
Gotcha.
So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Please state your name and address, please.
Scott Scutchfield, Lexington Road. Well, there's several things I want to point out. One, that area that's commercially was grandfathered in because that place has been there for a long time, and wasn't intended originally, if we had had planned well, for that to be there. The second thing is the term slippery slope. So if you give these folks this right, what are you going to do about the other people that have property all the way down Lexington Road when they ask to do the same thing? Do we want businesses in every lot between the Old Bridge and downtown? And the third point is when we talk about infill, we have plenty of opportunities for people in this community to have offices in town. And I would speak against having offices out on the highway as we drive in and out. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. All right. I thought we closed that part of our hearing, but anybody else wish to speak in favor or opposition of this proposal, this proposed future land use amendment? All right, anybody have any other questions or comments?
I'd like to, I've set similar concerns as Dr. Scutchfield about the creek and into Lexington Road, into that section of town, and gradually, you know, what's to prevent someone else from adding this and adding that. And over time, it could happen. I think we have to be cautious of that, because I don't think that a lot of that stuff needs to be developed commercially or mixed use or whatever. Just want to make that point.
Could I speak? I think what Mr. Good is asking for is a small number of people going into a building that's a residence now. And I don't think the neighbors will hardly notice any difference in the operation of the thing. As far as the slippery slope, I agree with that, but we meet on one request at a time, and we can address that when we get to it. And I don't see that he's gonna drastically or even mildly change the nature of the neighborhood.
One word, just short. I agree. I think we've, over the past 4 or 5 years, have really made a tremendous improvement in how this is done. There's wonderful people on this board, in the city and the county, and we don't want to limit growth, but we have the opportunity to if we need to. I think that's, you know, I agree with Scott, really. But at the same time, I think because of the way we've been planning, we can take care of any kind of the slope will have to be awfully slippery for us to miss it. You know, I think, and we want to make sure that, you know, development, growth, smart growth. We had that wonderful meeting mentioned, and everybody mentions it, no matter what your thoughts are. I think our minds are in a good place. You know, down on that end of the, I lived at Old Bridge for a while. It's a pretty long haul to the grocery store. But you know, I'm saying that, you know, if people seem to have a need, we don't want to exclude. the needs. If it's supposed to grow on the east side or the west side, we've already limited to what the growth could be on the bypass side with green space, and I agree with that. You know, but I think the Steve and the crew here and the city and county have done a good job in terms of positioning us to make those decisions as we say, on a one-at-a-time basis. And if there is a change that needs to be made for some extraordinary reason, we can do that as well. So, I mean, I think we're in a good position, even with all of those thoughts. I have thoughts on both sides, always. It's never, my job is not to be here and have a you know, a position. It's to look, our jobs is to go on both sides, to make sure we turn all of the things that could be a problem, and devil's advocate, whatever you want to call it. So anyway.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve the proposed future land use map amendment based on the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing. The proposed flume amendment has met the directive to amend the flume as outlined in Chapter 9 of the Comprehensive Plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you. We have a motion of Commissioner Kelly. There, second?
Second.
Steve.
Griffin.
Okay, we've got a second from Commissioner Griffith. All in favor? It's unanimous. Motion passes. Number 7, Tanner and Rachel Good have filed an application to rezone property on a tract of land containing .632 acres located at 4169 Lexington Road, Danville, Kentucky. The requested zone change is from agricultural to office professional.
So again, this is the second half of a request of this nature. I won't go through the entire staff report, obviously. It's very similar, except now the future land use map has been formally amended. The conditions are listed on page 3. And again, the conditions will be typed out with a source of title, parcel reference, signed by the applicant in recordable form that would be put in the Boyle County Courthouse in the deed books underneath a required land use certificate. And then lastly, again, I won't go through all this. The staff had no real concerns. We did look at all the policies that are outlined on pages 3, 4, and 5 that are in our comprehensive plan, several of which that actually encourage such development. You know, there is some language in here about talking about small businesses, and specifically, we have a goal to diversify our economic base, and it says to encourage small business growth development, including professional office. That is a policy directive right there on page 3 that is currently in our comprehensive plan. So when we get kind of to this slippery slope argument, I think the staff's always going to look to the comprehensive plan for guidance. These requests have to prove they're compatible, and then they have to meet these goals and objectives that are in Chapter 1 of the comprehensive plan. If we want to develop this county in a different fashion, then maybe the goals and objectives shouldn't say that we want to see small office development in the county. There's clearly no guidance that it be in the city versus in Junction City versus the county. There's a policy and a goal specific to this style of development, as well as a general development goal, a land use goal, or two that are in our, and so we look to the comprehensive plan on every case to put that information in front of you, as well as the map, and then you guys will look at these cases one by one. So the goals are there, the objectives are there for this zone change case. Again, it would be going to our new OP category, office professional, and the conditions are laid out in your staff report. There were no staff items of concern, and the findings and requirements you guys are required to do, which again, I want to point out on page 6, says every zoning map amendment, you guys must find it is an agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan, which is your future land use map and those policies. That's really where the kind of rubber meets the road. I've said that once already, but even if you all felt differently about this, if the applicant has demonstrated this is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, you guys almost have to approve it. To deny a zone change on just head or heart, or this is what I think or feel, if it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan, it says you guys must find that it complies, or find something else that you can deny it on if that's where you choose. But the goal is always look to our comprehensive plan. That's a serious document, and we're always going to put that in front of you. You guys look at the zone change request one by one. So again, that's on page 6 of your staff report. Page 7 is the up or down motion that we put in all reports, and Henry would be glad to help you with that. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Anyone wish to speak in favor of this zone change? Please come forward, state your name and address. Seeing none, anyone who wishes to speak in opposition of this zone change, please come forward and state your name and address. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing aspect of this. Any questions from the board? If you wish to make a motion.
I would definitely do that. Okay. I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan conditions submitted by the applicant. Based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted 2017 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the following items. Is consistent with the future land use map and is consistent with the adopted goals and objectives. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, if I might jump in and just
Please.
make
Please
my
do.
addition here. When we take the substantial step of changing the zoning for a piece of property, it's essential that we have some findings to back that up. I think that's why Steve puts these motions in the staff report. That's the reason that I always have to butt in and load verbiage onto these things. But it's important to add some kind of specific reference to what in the testimony supports the motion. And I also want to kind of respond to Steve saying that comprehensive plan conformity mandates approval. I would just add that the comprehensive plan is a big and broad document, and there's going to be room for reasonable minds to differ about what conformity with that plan is. But these are my suggested additions to your motion, which is that the zone change is compatible with the surrounding area, which includes higher intensity commercial zoning in close proximity with agricultural zoning and residential uses. That Chapter 9 of the comp plan gives guidance for residential development, and it says that we need to limit adverse impacts on that area, and that the lower intensity mixed use category and the proposed land use restriction to keeping it just a real estate office, these protections limit the burden on the surrounding residential areas, if that's agreeable to you.
Okay, we add that to the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Commissioner Kelly seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify it's unanimous. Thank you. All right.
Excuse me.
You say that. You're good. Here.
I would like to ask that for the Apex plats, that I get a signed copy of any that they're not going to use.
Okay.
All right,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you. All right, new business. Advisory committee, we don't have a report.
Didn't meet.
Personnel committee, there's no report. Budget committee report, I think Commissioner Manning has a report for us.
Yeah, Terry's going to do the
In
budget.
regards to
Yeah, we need
preliminary
to,
budget.
we need to talk about the preliminary budget for next year that we need to turn in the next several weeks. So all of you got a copy of the detailed budget sheets with your packet. And also in front of you, you have a single-page budget summary, and that's when I'm going to be talking to the most. I'm really just going to be talking about the changes in revenue and expenses from the Budget Amendment 1, which you approved last month, what we're currently projecting, and what we're currently planning on budgeting. So if you think of it, if you take your big sheet here, I'm going to start with column number 2, in from the left, which is the budget amendment number 1 that we approved last month. And we're going to start with the expenses and revenue from that. And we're going to look at the changes from that over to column number 4 from the left, which is the projected year end. So in the last 30 days, Steve has updated the preliminary budget amendment with a new projection, which says fiscal year 20 projected year end. Then we're going to go from that column over to the blue column on the far right, which is the preliminary budget that we're going to submit in the next several weeks. And if you notice on lines 2 and 3 on this detailed sheet, the amount we're asking from the city and the county remain the same at $75,000 a year in all of these. So now go to this single page, and we're going to start on the column on the left, which says revenue. And so a month ago, we approved budget amendment number 1, which had a revenue of $198,000, $108,300. There's only been 2 changes of that Steve made to do an updated projection for year end. He increased the amount of construction review fees by $1,100, and there's been like another $140 of miscellaneous changes. So we have a new updated projected year end on the revenue side of $199,260. And then if you look at the changes below that, that takes us down to the preliminary budget that we plan to submit for next year. We're reducing the amount of construction fees that we expect to get by $1,100, subdivision plat fees by $1,000, zoning permit fees by $5,000, land use and recording fees by $1,000, and then some other miscellaneous changes. And these are all just not expecting that we're going to have the level of activity next year that we had this year in terms of new construction and that type of thing. So a little conservatism. And that takes us down to the preliminary budget submission for revenue of $191,300. Just for reference, so the number right below that, the $184,600, is what we submitted for revenue last year for a budget standpoint. So this kind of compares the 2 budgets, I guess you would say. Then if you go to the next column, the expense column, a month ago for the budget amendment number 1, we approved $198,801 for expenses for the year. And then Steve's made 3 updated forecasts to the expense column for this year, and that is we're calling down the forecasted spending on dues and membership by $1,000. Bluegrass, AD&D, the folks that do our computer-based zoning and everything, calling that expenditure down this year by $2,000. And then there's a miscellaneous all other, several that are, none of them add up to over $1,000, but another $1,500. So we've called our expenses down now for the year from what we approved last month down to about $194,289. So if you pause right there and look at the projected year-end revenue and projected year-end expense, you can see that we're expecting to actually have about $5,000 more revenue this year than we have expense. But continuing on down the expense column so that we can get to what we look at to turn in on our budget, these are the changes then on the expenses getting from what we're currently forecasting for this year to the budget that we want to turn in for next year. Both the director and the admin assistant, we've got a budgeted 3.5% salary increase in the budget for those. We're actually calling down the amount of money that we will spend on part-time and seasonal interns by about $2,400. The amount we have to contribute to the Kentucky retirement system, which is, that's dictated to us, is up $3,400. Land use recording fees that we called down under the revenue side then falls through to the expense side because we just pass that along to the city, to the county. We're looking at buying another computer, replacing a computer, and that's why the computer hardware is up $1,000 compared to what we expect to spend this year. Bluegrass tomorrow, we don't expect to have another smart growth conference, so that's out. And then the Bluegrass AD&D, expecting to spend a couple $1,000 more with them, primarily probably because of the flume update that we're looking at. And then all other changes are like $177. So that takes us to a forecasted preliminary budget, I guess you would say a preliminary budget expense of $199,109. So we're actually budgeting more expense than we're currently budgeting revenue, which we've done the last several years. And so that's our preliminary budget that we're expecting, that we want to turn in for both revenue and expense. Well, any questions on the revenue and expense before I go to the ending reserve discussion? Okay.
I don't understand. Could you repeat that?
Sure.
Just kidding.
Why are we taking the bluegrass area development out and putting it back in?
Well, what happens is, we have a standing $5,000 contract that's billed hourly for our online GIS map. So it's $4,000. It was $5,000. We're not using that much. So we start off with the higher amount. If we maxed out use, we might need it, but what's shown is as we make amendments, they bill us at $50 an hour, and this year, we're probably not gonna spend $2,000. But we need to start off at the higher amount, just in case, we had a lot of activity, and we had to do a lot of changes to the map. But we have yet to spend the max money in the 4 or 5 years. That contract was there before I got here, and it was $5,000 a year, but it's a good service, because we can't do GIS in-house. But we're never gonna spend that much money, but worst-case scenario, that's what the contract states, is not to exceed $4,000, billed at $50 an hour.
Okay, let's go to the ending reserve discussion, and we're just going to talk about what we're currently forecasting, what we're currently forecasting for this year. And so we had a beginning balance this year of $86,835. If you look at Steve's updated forecast for revenue expenses that we already talked through, of $199,260, and then expenses of $194,289, that gives us an ending reserve this year of $91,806. And if you drop below that, then you'll see how that ending reserve breaks down. We're about $19,000 for operating reserve, $57,000 for legal construction reserve. And then, as you remember, last month, we're proposing to return $15,000, half to the city, half to the county, as a reimbursement, because we have more than enough reserves, from what we believe. And so if we take that $91,806, which is what we expect this year to end at with a reserve, and give $15,000 back to the city and county, that takes us up to the next column, which gives us our starting reserve for the preliminary budget of next year. So if you take $91,806, subtract $15,000, you're at $76,806, which is what we would start next year at. And then that's our budgeted revenue of $191,300, or the proposed preliminary budgeted expenses of $199,106, takes us to ending reserve of $68,997, which breaks down, as you can see below that, between operating reserves and legal construction reserves.
Can I ask a question? Do we have a policy of I guess the only thing, the legal is something that potentially we get sued or whatever.
Right.
Do we have a policy where we add to that? Do we have a policy that what we think is an appropriate amount of money to have in reserves for legal?
So, what we historically have done is the operating reserves is a formula 10% of our new revenue each year. So if that, Chief, you need this room?
You're going, I'm sorry.
Okay. So what happens is if our revenues boom up, we're gonna roll more money into that operating reserve by default, because it's 10% of that revenue. The other reserve account is kind of a catch-all, and we don't have a policy, but if we had a boom in revenue, we're probably gonna roll it into that other reserve, and then, or now roll it into that reimbursement city-county line. And you guys, there's not a policy, but you guys would make that decision. At what point, every quarter, we'll look at the money and see if our revenues are trending really high. We're gonna roll that money typically. When our revenues are trending high, we don't deviate too much from our budget line items, but as the money, this is a good example this year, our revenues have been really good.
So we have a set amount that we put in, we don't have a figure that we think, a target that we need.
You're talking about for the legal construction reserve?
Yeah, no.
Really don't. Oh, no, it's just how much we feel comfortable with and how much we want to give back to the city county.
Yep.
That's something we discussed then at the budget review,
Yep.
when the finance committee meets.
Yep.
So we do need a motion, I guess, to
This is our
adopt
preliminary
as our
budget.
preliminary
One
budget.
more comment.
Yep.
Like I said,
Sure.
I know in some of the other boards I'm on, or and I don't know what our chances of getting sued on certain things we do, but I think we've talked about this pipeline thing was a big one. And I think a legal reserve is very important aspect for any kind of body such as this. And the more money you have in there, the less likely you're gonna get sued. Because they look at that and they say, okay, they've got the money to fight this. So I mean, I think that's something we need to look at. So I don't know if there's that many opportunities to first get sued. I know we have opportunities every time we
Sure.
open our mouths, but
Sure.
I know the pipeline was a huge concern.
Sure.
And maybe still be, I don't know. But
Our challenge always is this, as an agency, a joint funded agency that gets money from city and the county, and they look to their budgets every year, us sitting on high reserve amounts, it's helped that they're justifiable, that we target them like we do, because I think they would understand us having a legal reserve for example, a pipeline fight. But for us to sit on big reserves, 80, 90, 100, $200,000, it makes the budget season tricky when the city then looks and says, whoa, you're asking for 75 and you got 200. That's kind of the back and forth we have to be careful about managing these reserves as our agency. Other agencies can maybe have reserves and no one's looking to them because they're not getting direct funding from the city and the county. And I think our budget committee does a good job as sort of doing that, and by categorizing them like that, I think that's helpful. In fact, we may take the construction off. We added that on just in case those projects we have that we're holding cash on maybe had some overruns. If we get all those billed out and it appears that we have enough money to do
I
so,
think those probably should be two different line items.
they really should be two different line items, but we'll probably just make that legal into the future, and just clearly it's legal reserve, and we'll explain that to the city and county if they ask us.
The pipeline came back into discussion because of the big ordinance update that we had in the last year, but the status of that line is still more on the end of dormancy. It's not something where they're currently pursuing expanding the line, so.
Thank you.
We do need a motion to
We do
approve
need
the
a
preliminary budget to submit to the city and the county.
Have a motion?
I'll make a
All
motion
right,
to approve.
Commissioner Kelly makes a motion to approve our preliminary budget, and Commissioner Sleet seconds that motion. All in favor? Unanimous. All right. Other new business.
Yeah, so I'll just jump into this. I know it's been a long meeting, and we got a new member. I promise you, we don't do this every month. But we had a lot of things submitted, but we do need to address these two items here, and that is nomination of officers. February is the month in our bylaws that you guys have to talk about election of officers to take effect in March. And then the second item, we have committee assignments, and I have that list here, and we have various committees, advisory, personnel, budget, and a member serves on beautification, and a few other things, technical review. We have some open slots due to some changes. We tend to like to have 3 members on these committees. Right now, tech review only has 2, budget only has 2, and beautification is something you guys tend to draw the short straw on every year and decide who's serving on beautification. We're on it by default for some reason. We don't do a lot on beautification, but just attend monthly. But you guys need to elect officers and talk about these committee assignments. It'd be nice to get another member on tech review and budget, because there's times trying to be a 2-person committee makes it tough if one has to miss. We like to at least then have 2 of the 3 there. Personnel very rarely meets, and personnel and advisory are technically reflect our officers, chair, vice chair, tend to serve on personnel by default. So you might start with your general officers, which are chair and vice chair, and after that, then we need to talk about the committee assignments, and that's just housekeeping. If you guys don't want to do it this month, we can do it next month. It's whatever y'all want to do.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that you and Jerry continue if you're willing.
I would second that motion.
So we have a motion, second. All in favor?
It's unanimous.
And then,
Committee assignments. Again, I've got them all here. Technical committee right now is Terry and Jim. We had a 3rd member, and it was Mary Beth, and she left, and we haven't replaced that, so we need a 3rd. Personnel right now is Jerry, Susie, and Jeff. Budget is Terry and Wendy, and advisory is Jerry, Jeff, and Susie. So first one, tech review. We really need a 3rd person on tech review. It's Terry and Jim. And it is those plats, it is truly technical review.
It's by far the best meeting you have, because it's a very setback, relaxed meeting with the developers to look at the plats and and really have a free-form discussion on it.
And Lisa does it as opposed to me, so it runs a lot better.
I'll volunteer for either one of those, if someone wants
Okay.
to do one or the other.
Okay. So you'd be okay with going on tech review?
Budget committee, tech review meets every month.
Every month.
Budget committee, we probably meet 5-6 times a year.
Correct. But tech review meets every month, 2 weeks before this meeting. So it's the second Wednesday every month at 9 o'clock. It's every month, because plats come in every month. And budget meets as needed, like personnel. Budget's fun. I like the budget committee.
We have free coffee and donuts in budget committee.
Do we? I didn't know that.
Do you meet at 9 o'clock?
We meet whenever
Well,
on
we meet
budget.
whenever at the time.
Any volunteers? Again, we want you all to participate on these committees if you want, and beautification is on the table if any of y'all want to serve on beautification. Jeff's currently the member now.
Tech committee.
You want to do tech?
So you're gonna do
I'll be
finance?
happy to do budget, but I'll give up my seat on the beautification committee.
I just didn't want to get dragged into it.
So someone needs to go on beautification. Vince? You live in a nice neighborhood.
Perfect for that.
It's hard to say I'm gonna be here, because
Yeah.
I leave usually on Wednesdays.
That-
That's on the first, what is it? The
Who's it?
first?
It's the first Monday of every month at 4 o'clock. It's chaired by Janet Nash.
That's possible.
First Monday of every month at 4
That's
o'clock.
possible. Yeah, if it's not on a Wednesday,
And I'm the backup proxy if
what
the
do we
planning
do
commission.
on that committee?
Listen to Janet and Janet and
We don't, they talk,
sit there and
they talk about flowers and trees
I'll
every
check,
month.
yeah, I'll check.
You want to do that,
Yeah,
Vince?
sure, I'll do it. Just put me on the list and tell me where to be.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and, is there, I have a question, what about the sign situation in town? Did we have anything to do with that?
The sign.
What
Like-
sign?
Like how poorly displayed signs are and how in disrepair, a lot of signs.
We are getting ready to work on that. We just did one this week. The new zoning ordinance does not allow for abandoned or,
Well, I use those anyways.
for example, you can't have a sign at a business that no longer is there. So we're gonna go around and tell folks the new zoning ordinance technically doesn't allow abandoned signs. And they're gonna have to do something with them. The problem is some of those technically are grandfathered in because we didn't have that rule before. But we just did one this week where a business has moved locations and they've left their old sign at 2 prior locations. So we're gonna address that. But as far as them being dilapidated, ugly, rusted, what our rules are, the sign can't be there if the business is not there. But if they wanna leave the frame up gutted, we can't stop them from doing that.
So if it's, yeah.
So anyhow, sorry.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
do we need to vote on these committees?
Yeah, we do need to vote on the committees and the officers. You did,
Where did you do it?
okay, the committees.
I'll make a
We've already done
motion.
the officers, what about, okay, the committee, so
So I'll go back through. So technical review would be Terry, Jim, and Steve. Personnel is Jerry, Susie, and Jeff. Budget will be Terry, Wendy, and Jeff. Advisory is Jerry, Jeff, and Susie. And beautification will be Vince.
Do you need three
Just
on
me?
there? I don't mind that.
On which committee?
Beautification.
We only put one member on by default,
I just didn't want to be
but you could be the backup if he's not there.
That'd be good.
backup.
Okay, okay,
oh, we need a motion?
yes.
I'll make a motion, we accept the committee membership as outlined.
That's it.
And a second, all in favor?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's unanimous.